Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech. This is the weekly show where I get to answer all your tech related mountain bike questions. So don't forget, you can get your questions answered on the show by commenting in the comments below. You can fire them into the email address that's written at the bottom of the screen right now. And of course you can get them to us via Instagram and Facebook as well. Don't forget to give us a follow. The first question is from James Mann. Why are there two measurements written on the bottom of the stanchion on some RockShox? So the bit of the fork, even though this is a Fox fork he's talking about, is this sort of area here. So this upper unit, this is called a crown steerer unit. It's one piece design. This steerer tube is bonded in or press fitted into the crown. Now, it'd be really expensive for someone like RockShox or Fox to produce one of these for every single travel section of forks. So what they do is they provide the travel settings for say 150 and 160mm, and depending on what setting you're running your bike at, you can refer to the sag by that measurement. Now of course it also means that that particular fork can be run at either of those two settings. Now to do that, it does mean a change internally, but it means you don't have to buy any external parts of the fork like those upper tubes. So next up is from Jacob Ewers. Hi GMBN, I'm fairly new to MTB maintenance stuff and I'm having a real strange issue with my rear hub and cassette on my 2018 Nukeproof Scout 290. Great bike that. The rear cassette won't tighten anymore and it's still moving around. Attached below should be a video of my issue. Alright, so let's have a look at this. Okay, so the cassette is moving away from the hub. That suggests that it's loose on the non-drive side. Yeah, okay, so basically in the video you can see the cap on the non-side. It's like a blanking cap that fills the space between the hub and the frame. Now that cap needs to be pushed up hard against the frame. Now sometimes, depends on the actual different hubs, I can't see in this particular one, there's a threaded section underneath that. That needs to be threaded up tight against the bearing and then the push end cap up against it. So it just seems that essentially that cap has come undone and then your cassette will sit neat up against the rest of the wheel and work. If it doesn't, drop me a direct email and I will take one apart off Blake's bike because he's got one and I'll show you how to rebuild it. Next up is a suspension related question from Chris Wright. I watched your video about volume spacers and I noticed that you skimmed over adding oil to the air chamber using the old method of adjusting air volume. I've got a 2009 Reba Dual Air, so that's a RockShox Reba. The Dual Air refers to having air chamber top and bottom of the air leg, one for positive and one for negative. And it won't take volume spacers. Could I add extra oil to make it more progressive? Yeah, so basically because they're separate chambers you can do that. If it's a solo air you can't do that because if you add oil into that leg it actually affects the little valve that lets the air travel from the positive into the negative chamber. So you can obviously add oil in there. You don't want to be putting too much in there, like 5 cc's, something like that will definitely help it ramp up a bit. The other thing you can do is to slightly overinflate the negative chamber. So on the back of the RockShox fork, it will have a rough sort of chart for your body weight and it will have a positive air pressure and a negative air pressure. So if you set that ballpark and just check that the sag you're happy with, then go back to the negative chamber on the bottom of the leg and add in say an extra 5 pounds of pressure and you'll find that the beginning part of the travel becomes really supple and it does ramp up quite a lot more at the end just because of the natural air ramp up within that fork. It's kind of like an old school version of what some of the forks like DVO and Formula are offering in their air spring designs. But you don't want to, like I say, put too much pressure in that negative chamber because the fork will creep down in travel. You'll actually lose a bit of that travel that you've paid all your hard-earned cash for. Next up is a tyre related question from Mark Terry. Hi guys, I've got a 2018 Commencal Meta 4.2 with 170mm Lyric forks, Hope Endurotech 35mm wide rims on boost hubs, and I want some tyre recommendations. The new bike has been set up for enduro races mainly and a bit of general messing around in the woods. On my old Commencal 26-inch wheel bike, I rode a Maxxis High Roller on the back and a Minion on the front, both in 2.35 inch. They work fine for me. I see that Maxxis have the wide trail options for most of their tyres. Also, Schwalbe have some 2.6 tyres out there like the Magic Mary. Are there any others out there that I should be considering? Yeah, do you know what, there's quite a few different options out there and there's only going to be more coming through from Michelin and other brands. The first tyre I would throw you to would be the Specialized Butcher, which comes in 2.6. Now it reminds me in performance terms of a Minion DHF, like the front one. So if you like that tyre, you're really going to like the Butcher. It comes in different compounds and I think it also comes in a 2.8, although you'd have to check that one out for yourself. And also, of course, Continental do the Baron in a 2.6. I know Blake's been riding that tyre. I've not ridden it yet, They're brand new, they've literally only just come out. They've got the all new casing, new compound, and even the tread design is slightly different. If I just show you, I've got Blake's wheel off his bike here. You can see really how big that tyre is, but it's exceptionally light for how big it is as well. It's slightly lower profile in terms of how big the tread is compared to like the 2.4 version, and they're quite a lot further spaced apart. The casing is a lot lighter, they inflate really easily tubeless. I was quite surprised by that, and they've got a lot more support than before as well. So that's a really popular tyre too. I know that Blake and Neil have both been running that and really like it, but of course you don't have to go as big as 2.6. I think you should definitely try it up front, because just the amount of traction you get, it's really easy on your hands, but it's not always that good to run a tyre that size on the rear. You've got to make sure your frame's got enough clearance, otherwise that's going to be compromised for starters. But personally, I always like to have a slightly smaller, slightly faster tyre on the rear, and then stick for something like that up front so you've got all that control. It's kind of that concept that you don't want any tyre to do too much stuff. So out back, I like the tyre to just concentrate on rolling nice and fast, and up front, all about the control. Kind of like a BMW, I guess, a rear wheel drive. The front is just left to sort of do its own thing. It's all about braking and steering. Next up is a tension related one from Jacob Strugala. Hey guys, I've got a question for you. Does the SRAM X01 have more tension than the SRAM GX? And what has more tension, if there is any, say SRAM or Shimano Saint? I'm looking to make my bike silent. Okay, if there is any difference between them, it's going to be negligible. You'll barely be able to notice any difference. On Shimano ones, you can actually adjust. You can pop the cap off, especially on the Saint and the XT and XTR. You can pop the sort of cover off and you can adjust the tension of that clutch. But you don't really just want to have the clutch super tight, because it's also going to make changing gear, it's going to hinder that. And on certain suspension designs, you can actually feel that through the bike. So you can feel the clutch almost like a low speed compression damper. In particular, single pivot bikes, you'll really notice this on. If you want to make your bike silent, there are other ways of doing this. And the number one way of doing it is by using this stuff. I'm always telling people to buy it. It's made by Scotch. It's a 3M rubber mastic tape. Put this stuff on your chainstay, put it on the underside of your chainstay, put this on the inside of your seat stay, where the chain in the higher gears, so that's the smaller sprockets, flicks up sometimes and just touches the seat stay there. Obviously it protects your bike against paint, but more importantly it makes it deadly silent, and that is the stuff that you want. And it's a lot cheaper than just swapping out your rear mech because you think one's got more tension in it. Andy J is up next. Hi guys, loving the content, but I've got a question for you. I've got a Yeti ASR 5. You gave it a super nice in a bike vault. Yeah, that sounds like us, definitely. But it's only a 26-incher. I love the bike and it is amazing to ride. However, I would like to update to 650B, which means buying a new bike. I can't afford a new Yeti, so I was hoping if you knew of any cheaper alternatives with similar geometry and riding style. It's got 120mm out back, a 150 fork on the front. I enjoy trail riding and climbing, some descending, as long as it's not too crazy steep. Okay, well firstly, you've basically said that there's nothing wrong with your bike, and it's a Yeti, so it's pretty timeless. So you're in a bit of a predicament there, because there's nothing wrong with 26-inch wheels. Okay, so the market has updated to 650B or 27.5, and of course there's 29-inch as well. But it doesn't mean that you have to do that as well, because there's plenty of spare parts available for you. However, if you do want to sell it and it's in good condition, now is the time to sell it, because Yetis do hold the sort of value on the second-hand market. So if you're considering it, I'd almost say get on with it and do it while it's still got a good value on there. Now, as far as changing to a new bike, it does depend actually, because you can't just say a new equivalent of the Yeti, because Yetis have a very sort of distinctive ride. But I had a little look online. I've got a few little bikes in mind to talk you through. Now, the first one is the White T130. So although White is a UK brand, they're also available in the States and available in Europe and other parts of the world. This bike with the 130, as you might guess, it's got 130mm of travel out back, the same up front. I've got a really old version, a prototype in fact, and that's got 140mm on the front. It's a really nice balanced bike, it's a trail bike, climbs excellently, but it's really, really good and sturdy for descending on as well. It's a very stiff and capable bike. They also make that in carbon, so if you fancied hopping up to something a little bit more expensive, then maybe that's your bike. It's not quite as expensive as Yeti in either variation, so definitely check that one out. Now, I've also put down there the Mondraker Factor, so that's 120mm out back and 130 up front. I love Mondrakers, what can I say? I think people should ride Mondraker bike. It's a really, really good. It's got progressive geometry. It's got the forward geometry up the front end. Very similar, in fact, to the Nukeproof that I ride, because that's a 29er and that's 150mm. So that's quite a big bike. Not really the sort of thing that sounds like you want. So next up is something with a few different options for you. It's the Canyon Neuron. So that's a 120mm travel bike in size small and medium, and it comes with 27.5-inch wheels. In the medium and large, it's got 120mm up front, 110mm out back, and 29-inch wheels. So they're doing a size specific thing. Now I noticed that you did say about 650B or 27.5-inch wheels. Why not try 29-inch wheels? I think 29-inch wheels are excellent. I mean, it is a personal preference thing. Before making any choice about changing your bike, I would definitely say try and demo a few. Definitely try some plus bikes, definitely try some 27.5s, and try some 29s. Whatever you buy, it's going to last you a long time, so make sure you make the right choice for you. Now finally, one other suggestion in here, just throwing this one out because I really, really like the look of these bikes. They're all Bayer, and it's the Occam TR, so that's a slightly shorter travel version, because they do an all-mountain version as well. It's got 120mm out back, 130mm up front, it's a 29er, it's super light. You will love it for climbing. For descending, the bigger wheels lets you get away with a little bit more than you think you can, and it's just all round a really nice looking bike. So again, well worth checking that one out if it's available where you live. But like I said, don't just buy the first bike that you want to buy, or the first bike you think that you should be buying. Try and demo a few, because sometimes you'll end up on something that's completely the opposite of what you were looking for to start with. Okay, next up is from Sean Shea. Hi Doddy, I'm riding a traditional geometry enduro bike, and he's got in brackets 425mm reach in large. Wow, that is fairly short by today's standards. Just so you know, a Canyon Spectral in a large is about 460mm reach, and that's not especially large, but that's fairly typical now. I'm considering upgrading to a modern geometry bike, 460mm reach in large. The area I ride stroke race isn't very high speed, mostly tight, twisty and technical with very short descents. Would you recommend I downsize to go for the 440mm reach in the medium, or would it be better to stick to my size in new school numbers? Maybe you could do a comparison of traditional versus modern geometry on different types of courses. Well, going from the back there, yeah, I'd love to do that video, because I think geometry can change everything. I think you could ride a bike, a rigid bike with really good geometry, probably as fast as you could ride a bike with poor geometry and good suspension on it. You know, there's a lot of different factors in there to consider. As far as sizing of the bike goes, it's a hard one, because I would always recommend someone would go as big as they can in a bike, despite what type of riding they do, whether it's cross country, downhill, even jumping. I just think having more room on the bike, so you're in the bike a bit more rather than cambered over the bike. If you can, you really want to try and demo some bikes. Now, I know that's difficult with people all over the world, but there are a lot of demo fleets, the demo occasions going on, so see if there is something even remotely local to you, and maybe plan a weekender for it if you've got to drive a bit of a journey to do it. I promise you it's worth trying a few different bikes. Now, we do have a video though planned in future about comparing traditional geometry to modern geometry, and also answering some of those questions that a lot of people are anxious about, like will a longer bike be less fun in agile situations? I mean, like I say, I'm a big fan of the longer geometry because it puts my weight in the correct place on the bike. You shouldn't have to move too far forward or too far back at any time. If you're having to do that, your bike probably is too small for you, even if you think it feels fun on the nimble stuff. I promise you, even the massive Nukeproof that I'm riding, so size XL, it's got 515mm reach, if you want to know that, which is colossal. I'm running that with 800mm wide bars, 29-inch wheels, and I promise you I can thread that through any sort of little technical trail. There's no issue with that. It's all down to the way that you approach the riding. But again, definitely try and ride some bikes before you buy them if you can. Hi, I recently decided to try a Gates Carbon Drive with my commuter bike. I know the system's also used for MTB. What is your opinion on it? Aside from the complexity of changing a tyre and general maintenance, I'm loving it on my commuter bike, but I've heard lots of bad stuff from mountain bikers. Keep up the good work. Well, firstly, let's just explain what it is. It's a belt drive, carbon belt drive. I absolutely love the concept of this because there's nothing to sort of corrode, and in theory, nothing to stretch or snap in future. Of course, nothing's invincible. We do know that, you know, the carbon belt could break, just like your frame could break and other stuff. But it's a progressive look at what's coming next in bike technology. We've had the chain forever, and although there's technically nothing wrong with it, we've got to improve things, and this is surely one of the ways to do it. Now, if you just directly compare the chain to the Gates carbon belt drive, the chain, even though it's metal, it's heavy, it can stretch, it can snap, all those things, there's surprisingly little friction in the system, even though it's so old. Whereas the Gates system, I mean, they claim that there's barely any friction in it, and I've ridden this on both a single speed setup bike, and I've also ridden it on a Mojo Geometron bike, so that's the Nicolai with the crazy geometry, but it also had the pinion gearbox on it. So I can't actually tell you how it directly compares just in an even footing, because I was also riding with the extra friction that you tend to get with a gearbox bike. Now, personally, I think I could probably put up with that because I love the fact that everything was enclosed, and you're removing the rear mech from the bike, you're removing the cassette, all of that stuff that just dangles down, that corrodes, it needs a lot of attention. Gearbox full of oil in there, looking after your gears, everything's going to work smoothly all the time. The belt drive, I love that tech, but I've not spent enough time to give you a defined answer on it. But I have written a script on exactly that, really, is we're going to be taking a look at all the different alternative drivetrain options out there. And I think we're probably going to include something like the belt system from Gates, and look at stuff like the Nicolai system and all the pinion gearbox, and maybe even roll off as well. There's a lot out there. Next up is Aaron Hold. Hi guys, I recently converted to a 1x setup, but I'm having trouble getting a good first gear that I'm happy to climb with. Currently I've got a 36 tooth cassette as my biggest gear. Am I able to jump up to 42 or 46 without doing any modifications? Technically not, no, because it does depend on what your rear derailleur capacity is. So you tend to get 3 different types of rear derailleur. You get short cage, medium cage and long cage. Now, the short cage, not a chance. Medium cage, which could be on your bike, they're normally compatible up to 36 tooth. And then the long cage, they're normally compatible up to the 46. Now, if you don't know what it is, an easy way to tell is by measuring the distance between the 2 jockey wheels, or the guide wheels there. So if it's around 75mm, it's probably a medium cage. And if it's above 80 or near 85 or sometimes 90, that is a long cage, and you should be okay with that. Now, quite often it does say the capacity on the rear derailleur itself. If not, you can find that information out online, and then you should be good enough to upgrade your cassette to a bigger climbing gear. Now, the other option, of course, is to not change that and to put a smaller chainring on the front. Now, that's going to give you the climbing gear you need, but as a downside of that, it does mean your higher gear is going to be a lot lower. So is that important to you? Is it hillier where you ride, as in respects to needing to pedal down those hills? Would you rather freewheel down the hills and be able to winch back up? Just have a think about what's more important to you, losing out on the low end or the high end, and then work it out from there. So last question is from Craig O'Boyle and related to tyre clearance. I just put a Continental Trail King 2.4 on my Pivot Mac 429 trail bike with Derby rims. So I know Derby rims, they're huge carbon fibre rims. They're very, very similar to the Ibis 741 and 941 rims. I've got a set of the old 741s. I'll bring them in so you guys can see them at some point. The new little rubber fuzz that wears off is hitting the frame just up where the chainstays meet towards the front of the tyre. Is this too little clearance? Most of my riding in Colorado Springs is not heavy mud or really muddy at all. Dry and kitty litter style gravel, but sometimes conditions change quickly. How much clearance do you really need? Well, okay, so firstly, let's take a look at that tyre. So that particular tyre, I ride that on my Canyon, and it's quite a high tyre. It's 2.4, but I haven't actually measured it, but I know the carcass size is 2.4 wide, but it's very high for a 2.4, and the tread profile is high as well. And on my Canyon Spectral, the clearance again is very minimal on the fork, which is a pike, and out back as well. And I also notice it buzzes, and I cannot run that tyre when it's muddy. It simply just won't go through the frame. But you know what we're like in the UK, we chop and change our tyres all the time to suit where we're riding, when we're riding, and of course the conditions we're riding in. Where you're riding, it might not be such a problem, but if it's that close to the frame, I'd be concerned about sucking up bits of gravel in between the tread and taking chips out of your frame. I'd probably look at going for a slightly smaller tyre on the back. Now, you've also said you're running the Derby rims. Now, I know that they're quite wide rims, and they're obviously going to make the tyre even bigger. So that's something else to factor in. You could still go for like a 2.3 and it would be nearer to what a 2.4 would regularly be, and you'd still get that clearance back. Also, now, a bit of a slim chance with a wheel as strong as a Derby, but you could still egg shape your wheel. You could have a crash, you could do anything that basically distorts that wheel. And if that happens, there's no sort of room for error. The tyre will buzz on the frame, it's going to take your paint off and probably ruin that ride as well. And the same goes for if you just buckle your wheel and it's rubbing side to side. You really want to have enough clearance for any sort of conditions. I mean, it's a mountain bike at the end of the day. You don't want it to be restricted by something as simple as small tyre clearance. Okay, so that's another Ask GMBN Tech in the bag. Hopefully it's been useful for you guys and answered some of your questions. If not, let us know in the comments below. Anything you want to pick up on and want me to expand on, I'll try and answer as many of those personally as I can. And of course, you can send your questions in for next week's show. Again, in the comments below, fire them into the email, hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, all of those methods. Love getting that stuff from you guys. Keep sending the stuff in, love it. Now, for a couple more really useful videos, the wheel debate kind of still comes up quite a lot. The 27.5, 29, they've been around for a long time now, but Neil is riding both size wheels right down here, and he's going to answer some of those questions for you. Really good, informative video with some decent stuff in there. Now, if you want to know a bit about suspension adjustment and what those adjustments do when you're actually on the trail and how it affects your riding, click down here. It's a video I filmed out in Spain, just demonstrating some of the extremes, running too soft, too hard, too fast, too slow, that sort of stuff, just so you guys can see what the suspension on the bike does when you don't set it up correctly. As always, click on the globe to subscribe because we've got new content coming for you every single week, and we love making that stuff for you. And of course, if you like the video, give us a thumbs up.